I hope you're ready.
This is Unbridled Thoughts.
We want to hear what you have to say.
Welcome back to Unbridled Thoughts. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Ren, and you better grab the mane because there's no reins in Unbridled Thoughts.
Well, today is very exciting. We are recording a podcast at LitFest, which we've never done anything like this before.
No.
So it's very, very, very exciting. And we have a very fun special guest, Mark McCray.
Yes. So you are an author. You've written a bunch of cool books, and you've done some programming and networking as well.
Yes.
So we are so excited to talk to you more about that. And if you're listening and not watching our audio, we are literally like in a sky room.
Yeah.
This window sky room above the Lit Fest in Central Georgia. I feel like I'm like in some sort of cool like space station office, and we're like saving the world together. Like
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or Star Trek. I get Star
We have
Trek.
to come together.
The Enterprise.
Yes. Well, let's get into it. We want to get to know a little bit more about you and your published works that you're talking about here at the festival.
Sure.
But we want to do Blazing Saddles, which is a game we play with our guests to kind of loosen you up and kind of get to know you a little bit better. So, in your personal opinion, what is the best Saturday morning cartoon?
Ooh, that's a hard one. And I tell you, I get asked, people ask me that question a lot. And it's like, who's your favorite kid? And I don't know. I have two sons, and sometimes I go back and forth, depending on what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, depends on the day.
Right.
Sometimes the hour.
Right, exactly. Well, I will start off, and this is something, I think a lot of people know. The show that sort of brought me in, where I basically went from a viewer to like, wow, this is really cool. I want to get into this industry. So there was a Justice League of America cartoon from 1967. It was part of the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure. And at the time, I only knew about Superman. And so I'm thinking I'm watching a Superman cartoon, and all of a sudden, all these other superheroes showed up. And I'm like maybe 4 years old or something like that. And I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing. There are other superheroes. And at the same time, there was a series called Space Ghost and Dino Boy. And the same year, Space Ghost was sort of crossing over with the other superheroes who also had their own shows on the network. And after that, I just sort of never looked at television the same because I didn't know that such a world was possible. I didn't know that the individual programming I was watching could be connected to a studio because I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
I said, well, this is great. Like, what else is happening? Then a little bit later, a little bit older, I was at day camp and I met this kid named Gerald. And Gerald, I kind of consider sort of like my Yoda because for some reason, Gerald could predict what the studios out in LA and Burbank were going to make for the following season.
Wow.
And I said, well, how do you know this? He says, oh, I just kind of know. I have my, somehow he knew. And, no internet, but somehow he knew. And
Just great intuition.
Huh? Yeah. And so at the time, there was a show called The Archie Show based on the Archie comics. And it was the #1 animated series. It broke all type of ratings records. This show was getting bigger ratings than primetime series at the time. Now you have to consider that there was no streaming, no cable, not just the broadcast networks. And he said, oh well, the studios are probably going to go into the comic book world and see what else is being published at Archie Comics. And along came Sabrina, and he also predicted Josie and the Pussycats.
Wow.
And I was just, okay, I want to be like you. I want to be a predictor.
To have a brain like that.
Yeah. And the thing about Josie and the Pussycats, which I think is like one of the most subversive Saturday morning shows on the air because there's a lot going on in there. It gets compared to Scooby-Doo a lot, but it actually was published 6 years before Scooby was created.
Okay.
And I thought that show was just going to be super corny. I didn't understand why any studio would want to do it because it just wasn't, Archie had the music, Sabrina had the magic and the wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Josie was just a regular comic strip.
Yeah.
But see, the powers that be at Hanna-Barbera Productions, which was the #1 animated studio at the time, they decided to, let's take the show in a different direction. Let's kind of put in some adventure elements. Let's throw in some monsters. Let's sort of make it like an adventure comedy. And I was just kind of shocked by the direction. And then I just started reading credits. I'm like, well, who are the guys that did this? Because I was expecting the show to be bad. And the next thing you know, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And so I started reading credits. And at the same time, Archie Comics published a companion story where the characters visit the Hanna-Barbera studios.
Okay.
So this is the first time I'm able to see the people who are working behind the scenes. And it was my introduction to the entire animation process.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that was pretty inspiring
Yeah.
around the same time. And after that, I just became hooked. So it wasn't necessarily one particular show. It was like a combination of shows that just kept building and making me wanting to be a fan and someone that wanted to work in the industry.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm gonna nerd out. Is Archie the cartoon that had like a #1 hit on the Billboard charts? But it was a fake band.
Yes, it was a fake band. It was sung by a singer named Ron Dante, and it was the #1 song from 1969. In the Billboard chart, and Sugar Sugar was the name of the song.
That's right, yeah.
And the series was also #1. There was this huge debate on Facebook, like, all these fake cartoon groups, like which cartoon groups that had musical backgrounds or musical people singing behind them, which ones actually charted, but quite a few did chart. But that was the big one. And when that happened, all of the animation studios actually was trying to get in the music business. Like they were hiring people who would write songs for, mainstream artists. Trying to capture what the Archies captured. But for the Archies, they sort of got lucky, or Ron Dante got lucky, because most radio stations back in those days, if it was a fake band or a cartoon band, they would not play it on the radio. But some DJ out in LA or somewhere in California decided to, play Sugar Sugar.
This is my jam.
Yeah, and
sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. Exactly. And then once he did, some of the other DJs on the radio station started playing it, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Archie is actually the first comic book that my dad bought me because of the Archie cartoons.
Oh, wow. Cool! I didn't know that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Yeah, I'm a lifetime. When I was at Adult Swim, the guys they used to joke with me. They were like, "Mark, you're the only Archie fanboy I know."
My dad is a huge Archie fanboy. I mean, forever.
Because like most comic book fans, they're in the DC camp or the Marvel camp, and I've bought my share of both. DC and Marvel, but Archie sort of has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, that's what my dad felt. He loved it. He loved it so much. He wanted me to get into it, but I was a girl and I was rebellious at that time. So dads are ugly and stupid.
Exactly. Like, what is this?
All right, so my question is Star Trek or Star Wars?
Okay, I was ready for this one. All right, so one of the first conventions I ever did after the Best Saturdays was published was I did a convention called Trek Atlanta. And it was my first exposure doing a panel and all that kind of fun stuff. And so, huge Star Trek fan. I did a Star Trek panel at Dragon Con as well, comparing how the animated series influenced ideas that came in Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. However, as much as I am a Star Trek fan, I love Star Wars Andor.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that that series really roped me in, and I really became I've always watched the Star Wars movie, but Andor, something about that story made me more an invested Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's coming back for another season or not, but it was one of those that it was just a great series. And it just made me want to dig more. And I love how they connect Andor to the Star Wars.
That's what I was going to say. The storytelling in that is incredible. The character development and the storytelling, and it just like added a whole layer of like lore and like depth to the whole franchise as a whole, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I like about the Star Wars universe versus Star Trek is that I feel like if Star Wars actually existed, it was just a little more realistic. I like the fact that I can go to one planet and it's like no technology and everyone's looking dirty and to, you know, where they go to another world and it's beautiful and futuristic and pristine, but still down to earth enough that it makes it real. You know, the thing that always kind of threw me about Star Trek was the whole transporter business. I'm sorry, I'm not getting in a transporter. You know, I mean, well, I say that. I mean, you know, or not a transporter, but you know, just the fact that my molecules might be scrambled around or there might be an accident. And I think in the very first Star Trek motion picture that actually happened to someone. I mean, it was it was a little bit of an accident where the person's molecules didn't.
There is one, it's with the guy with the beard. I can't think of anything when I need to. Isn't the Next Generation? Isn't that the one where they do that?
I can't remember. I know on Voyager, two of the members got molded. Two of the characters got molded together in a transporter accident, and there was this whole debate that they deserved to be a person and not be split apart. So there was this whole philosophical debate on, you know,
my goodness,
of rights and anyway.
I know, like they say it doesn't hurt, but it just looks like it would hurt. They just like mute the screams as you go through.
Although when I'm taking a road trip, sometimes I wish I could just transport to that other city.
Could you imagine?
Seriously.
Just like I feel like having a beignet in Paris.
Right, exactly.
So cool.
And you're there. You know?
That'd be awesome.
Well, what button do they push? You know, where they're like, okay, we need warp speed now. You know? I want that button.
Not while you're transporting them.
No transporting. Go warp speed.
Well, what was your favorite cereal growing up?
Frosted Flakes.
And
I was really bad about Frosted Flakes. It already had a lot of sugar in it, and I would add sugar to the Frosted Flakes.
People who did it.
I'm surprised I didn't get instant diabetes, you know. It was, you know, and back in those days, we're talking about in the 70s, you know, there was a whole lot more sugar in those cereals back then. I think a lot of the companies sort of regulated things a little bit later, but you know, it was probably like 25% of sugar in those cereals back then, but so good.
Less chemicals, though.
Sure.
So you were winning there.
Exactly.
You win some, you lose some.
Oh, for sure.
So who's your dream cartoon partner?
In terms of like producing or voice work? Or?
It's your world. You
maybe
get to
both.
pick whatever you want. Your work partner.
All right. Well, I would have loved to have worked with Mel Blanc, who voiced all the Looney Tunes cartoons. I think that someone should have given him a special Oscar because the man, you know, he's the man with 1,000 voices. But it's like I just feel like a lot of the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons would not have been the same if it wasn't for his talent. Just his ideas and his approach to the roles and his nuances and his voice work, it was just fantastic. I also would love to have worked with a woman named Jane Webb. She was a voiceover. She did a lot of Saturday morning stuff. She did the original voice of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She was another one, not as well known, but a very talented voice actress. She did the original Aunt Hilda in the Sabrina cartoon, and Aunt Hilda was such a witch, I guess, you know. But it was like really good, and sometimes she would be having conversations with herself. If you know that she did all the voices for a lot of the female characters. It was just kind of interesting. I'm like, how did she come up with these voices? She can go very low, and she can go very high, or she can be a little bit in the middle. And I will always try to figure out, okay, which is the real voice? You know? Because I never knew what the real voice was. Like Mel Blanc, you kind of knew sometimes what his real voice was, and then all the different iterations of the voice characters that he did. But with Jane Webb, I could never figure it out. In terms of production companies, I would have loved to have worked with Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. They had a company called Ruby Spears. They did a show from the 1980s called Thundar the Barbarian. And oh my God, that show was fantastic.
Yes.
Well, first of all, Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, they started out at Hanna-Barbera Productions.
Yeah.
You know, they were writers, and everything that they touched at Hanna-Barbera was just gold. They were really great writers. They co-created Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And I ended up, you know, developing a working relationship with Ken Spears, because when I was at Cartoon Network, we were doing an anniversary piece with Scooby, and my manager said, reach out to those guys and see if there's any extra information we can get. And I was emailing him, I'm like, well, while I have you, so thanks for answering that question, but here's some of the other things I wanted to know. And he was just telling me stuff.
That's
and
awesome.
A lot of that interview is going to be in my next book.
Okay.
Yeah,
very
because there were
cool.
things about his career I didn't know. But those guys, they were just, they started out as writers, and then they were sort of spun off into their own company, Ruby Spears. They did Plastic Man. They did the first Plastic Man cartoon. I'm trying to think what else, other cartoons that they did. Of course, I can't remember right now. But I would have loved to have worked with those guys. I think they were really smart. They knew what I call future trend casting. Like all the successful studios and networks, they had a way of figuring out, and I still think there are people in the industry this way, what do people want to see, whether it's cable streaming or broadcast, 6 months or a year down the line? What do they want to see? Or what do you think people want to see? And I think Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, Ruby Spears Productions, they were really good at figuring out what the next big thing is going to be.
That's really cool.
And so it would have been great to work with them. Another company would have been great to work with is Filmation Associates, later known as Filmation Productions. They're basically the ones that created competitive, revenue-driving Saturday morning, and that's really the basis of the best Saturdays of our lives. They created The New Adventures of Superman. That show broke all type of ratings records. The executive that greenlit it, Fred Silverman, he would become a legend in the industry, but he got his first big promotion. The company Filmation Associates, they became players in the business. But more importantly, the sponsors came in and wanted to sponsor superhero programming, because prior to Superman, you know, like a company like Kellogg's, they were like, until you have the ratings numbers, we're not even gonna, you know, sponsor your show, because they want eyeballs, and there was a certain threshold. And a lot of the superhero shows before that they weren't reaching that, and Superman sort of broke the barriers. And Filmation, one of the folks that ran the company was a gentleman named Lou Scheimer, and he became one of my mentors in the business. But they were also really good at trend casting. You know, they had the superheroes from DC. Then they also introduced the Archies later, and more ratings records. And they brought in the first African Americans on Saturday morning. And they seemed to figure out, again, what was coming next.
Very cool.
And then they did, which was their biggest hit, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which that was also a new business plan. That was like first run syndication for new shows, for an action show. And then, you know, G.I. Joe came along, and Transformers, and Thundercats, and Gem, all the rest.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
And they kind of changed the illustration a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, it always continues to advance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the budgets always increased every year, and like with a lot of shows from the 1980s, a lot of the work was sent overseas. I met a producer that worked, you know, during that era, and he said the biggest technology boom for cartoons in the 1980s was the invention of the fax machine. And I'm like, how? Like, why was that important? He says, you don't understand. He said, when shows were being produced overseas, you know, there was a lot of long distance phone calls. And they would send over the storyboards. They would mail the storyboards over. But once the fax machine became a thing, you can fax the storyboards, and if there's any changes or mistakes or updates, you can fax it back. But prior to that, there was a lot of flying back and forth.
So there were days.
Yeah.
Now they got it down to minutes.
Right, exactly. And so he said that just completely changed the whole production cycle of how animated cartoons were done back in those days. You know, especially when a lot of the work went overseas.
Yeah. That's crazy.
I love how passionate you are about this, because I'm learning like so much. I'm like, whoa, this is so cool. Well, we talked a little bit about your Saturday mornings, and we learned your father introduced you to your first comic book, which was Astro Boy.
Right.
Would you say that was your favorite?
Oh yeah, still one of my all-time favorites. So one of the things, my dad was really funny. My dad liked cartoons and he liked comic books, but he never really talked about it.
Okay.
And so Astro Boy was a show that we would watch every day before. So I used to do like a half day of kindergarten, and so it was like Astro Boy and Old School Jeopardy. We would watch that. I didn't know what was going on with Jeopardy. Like I said, I'm 4 years old. I think Jeopardy came on first and then Astro Boy, but I knew I had to sit through Jeopardy in order to get to Astro Boy. And so, you know, we kind of bonded over that. And when Astro Boy came out on VHS, you know, I showed him a copy of it, and he was like, oh yeah, that was like one of my favorites. And he actually took his hand and started imitating the way that Astro Boy would fly around.
Oh my goodness.
You know, but he also liked comic books, and he bought me my first Superman comic and my first Batman comic, which, you know, I always said that my dad was the cheapest man in the Bronx. You know, it was no to everything. But I guess the comic books were cheap enough.
Yeah.
And because he was a fan, he got me started in that area as well.
Cool.
That's so special. I love that.
I know.
What other comic books were your favorite that you can think of?
Okay, yes. So in the beginning, it was Superman, Justice League of America, Archie comics, of course, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four.
Okay.
Huge Fantastic Four fan. First, they called them the Marvel's first family. Those were like the first ones. And I used to buy, sometimes I would buy Gold Key comics. And Gold Key comics were, they would adapt the Saturday morning shows into stories. And so if it was a Scooby-Doo episode, you can see the comic book version of the same story. Yeah. And sometimes I would buy those because we had a black and white television. And at least I could see the story now in color.
Yeah.
You know, because I was one of those, I feel like our family was like the last family on the block to get a color television. And someone who was a fan of television, I was just like, please, please, please. And one day I came home and there was the color TV.
Wow.
I was shocked. I was like, finally. You know, but a thing I used to do, which is kind of crazy, and my brother said he would blackmail me and tell people what I was doing. I used to take my comic books and pretend that they were networks and kind of program them.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
pretty dang, you were like manifesting over there.
and my brother said, I'm going to tell everybody what's going on in the basement, you know.
Your dirty little hobby.
Right, exactly. And so one day I said, all right, well, tell them. And he did, and our friends were like, huh? Like they didn't understand.
Yeah.
And I just kind of laughed at my brother. I said, well, you can't hold that over my head anymore.
That's right.
So that was that.
So did you grow up in New York?
Yeah, I grew up in New York.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's really neat.
Yeah, but I've been living down in Georgia since '96. I actually came down here to work with Cartoon Network.
Oh, really?
I did a project with them. So before the Best Ideas of Our Lives was a book, it was a newsletter.
Yeah.
And I would send it around to people in the industry. And I got really lucky because people were reading it and they were liking what they were reading. And all of a sudden I started getting freelance jobs from the newsletter. So Sid and Marty Krofft called. They made a show called Sid, you know, HR Puff and Stuff and Land of the Lost.
Yeah.
And one of their executives, a guy named Joe King, started mentoring me. You know, he would tell me the 411 on dealing with the networks. He said, if no one calls you back, then I'm interested in your show. And, we don't pitch shows to this network because the person's a real, you know, a-hole, or, you know, stuff like that. He explained to me how syndication works, how everyone has to put the money up front, and then you have to sell the show to the individual studios. You know, really super nice guy. DC Comics called. I did a trivia show with them. There was a guy named Bob Rasakis who was considered the DC answer man. And if you were a fan and you had a question, you can send something to Bob.
Yeah.
But Bob was sort of like me. He was sending letters to DC Comics when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And when editors and writers made mistakes, he would find ways to clear up the mistakes. Like, for example, there was a Supergirl story that was written, where Supergirl gets exposed to gold kryptonite. And unlike green kryptonite that would just kill a Kryptonian, gold kryptonite just robs a Kryptonian of their superpowers forever and permanently.
Whoa.
And Supergirl was tied to like a boulder-sized chunk of gold kryptonite.
Yeah.
But after she was rescued, she got her powers back. And everybody was like, wait, no. She should not have any powers. And Bob Rasakis got the writer out of the issue by saying, well, it was a mutant version of gold kryptonite.
That's the loophole.
Yeah, that was the loophole. And so I started writing him. I wrote him a letter, which is also will be in my next book. It's about the Saturday morning backlash and censorship. I wrote Bob a letter about crazy story about Aquaman's boots. Okay, so there was an Aquaman cartoon, and Aquaman wore boots in the cartoon. But in the comic book, he did not. He just had the green leggings.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why did they change his design?
Yeah.
And so Bob gave me his best answer. But what I found out later was that the company Filmation that were doing these DC cartoons, they made a lot of changes to costumes. And some of them were for style reasons, and some were for animation reasons. So Wonder Girl was in the Teen Titans, and she usually has stars and on her a bathing suit bottom, and they just took the stars away. They just made it a plain blue bottom. Kid Flash's colors are usually yellow and gold, and they made it red and gold. But they made it red and gold. What I realized when you look at the Teen Titans lineup from that 67 cartoon, 2 of the characters have similar colors, and the other 2 characters have similar colors. And so if you're doing paint and ink in animation, those paint and ink folks, if they're only dealing with certain colors, that means that they can color in the characters much quicker than having to deal with a whole bunch of colors.
And having to like do the tedious little things frame per frame.
Right, exactly. So it was like a shortcut. And because Filmation didn't own the DC characters, they wanted to put their own little touches on it. The thing that gets me is that some people will say, oh, they didn't get the costumes right. I said, they knew exactly what they were doing. I said, keep in mind, this was a DC production. So any costume changes had to go through the DC line, had to go through the DC executive line. The executive producer was from DC Comics, and it was a DC production, and so they just didn't make changes willy-nilly. They, had to get approvals. So like a producer like Bruce Timm, who created Batman the Animated Series, he designed a new Supergirl costume when she made her animated debut, and everybody's like, that's great, that's wonderful, but no one ever said it was a mistake. Whereas these guys that did stuff in the 1960s, they just didn't know what they were doing. But they made changes on everyone's costumes. Even the Spider-Man cartoon, there was just less detailed because for animation. And the Super Friends that had Wonder Woman, so what they did to get around the star issue on the bathing suit, they drew the stars huge. So instead of like making them smaller, because big stars are easier to animate than a bunch of little stars, and so that's how they got around the issue. So it's just kind of interesting watching or just observing what the changes and what animators did to create shortcuts for production.
This is really cool. I feel like I'm learning so much.
Things that you don't really even think about, you know what I mean? We just watch. I just watch cartoons.
And you know what? And I'm glad you said that, because I think most cartoon fans just watch cartoons and they don't think about it. But like when I started at Cartoon Network, people were very, I would say, a little critical. I don't like that cartoon. Why? Because I don't like the animation. I said, well, what about the story? Was the story good? Yeah, but I don't like the animation, so I can't watch it. Like, okay. And there are people who are purists in the industry that feel that way. But then they'll split hairs about other stuff. Like some animation professionals will knock a cartoon because of the animation. But then there is a limited animation cartoon that they just absolutely love. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If you love this, then why are you knocking that?
Because it just speaks to their soul for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I don't even understand why animation is an issue. Because nowadays, I feel like anyone can be an animator. Like the gatekeeping has gone away. You can, get a, buy the software for it.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff you can teach yourself, or you can go to school and learn it.
Yeah.
But like back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of gatekeeping, and unless you were a really good artist, you could not be an animator. But if you know something, if a Disney production cost $1 million to make, and a Saturday morning cartoon costs $40,000 to make, why do you think the $40,000 cartoon should be as good as the $1 million cartoon?
Exactly.
And then act shocked when they're not the same quality. And that's one of the things that used to make my head crazy when I first got in the industry.
Well, and it's a big difference too, because if you're a Saturday morning cartoonist, then you're like having to come up with new stuff on a weekly basis. You know what I mean? The production is just like, okay, we're going to work on this product, this for a year, 2 years, and then we're done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, just that's just the way it is sometimes. But
it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah. But anyway. I'm done with that.
Award-winning writing for TV. What did you write? And what award did you win?
Okay,
we did a bunch of research, but we could not find.
And you're not going to. So here's the deal. So back when I first got out of school, I was working in television in the 80s. And so when cable first came out, they had their own awards.
Yeah.
It was called the Cable Ace, because cable was not allowed to compete with broadcast and the Emmys.
Okay.
And so
I remember those though.
Yeah,
my dad would talk about them.
The Cable Ace. And so the team I was working with, we wrote a bunch of commercials promoting Group W Cable, that was the cable station I worked at, and HBO. There was a show called Not Necessarily the News. This was like a sketch comedy series, and some of the actors came down, and we shot like 5 commercials, and all those commercials were submitted to the Cable Ace, and they won.
Wow.
And I didn't get a statue, but I was supposed to get a certificate, but by the time that happened, I wasn't working for Group W anymore, and I was told, well, you can just email the Cable Ace people, and I just never did it. But my ex-coworker that processed it, she goes, Mark, we're good. You won. It's official.
Yeah.
So, and then years later, the Cable Ace Awards went away because they allowed cable to become Emmy contenders. So that's how that went about. But
the way I see it, you're owed an Emmy. So if y'all are hearing this,
where's his Emmy?
Yeah.
Pour it over.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. So. Well, you have a podcast too, don't you?
Yeah. Well, my podcast is kind of on hiatus. It's on hold right now.
Yeah.
But it's called the Best Saturdays of Our Lives podcast.
Okay.
It's available on Apple TV or any other places that you can find podcasting. And that was started at, I met a guy at the Trek Lantern who had a couple of podcasts going, and he read a copy of my book and said, hey, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, yeah, sure.
Oh, cool.
And so we did that for about 2 or 3 years, and that's how we ended up at DragonCon. So we did a panel, how Star Trek the Animated Series influenced all the future Star Trek franchises. And we just kind of went through the cartoon, because the cartoon was not supposed to be canon, but the writers still took things from the cartoon and put it like in Next Generation. So like, what is it? It's the room that you go in and you have the fantasies. I can't remember.
Oh, yes.
The holodeck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the holodeck actually was supposed to show up in Star Trek, the original series, but they just never got around to it. And so it ended up being featured in the cartoon. And when Star Trek Next Generation premiered, you saw the holodeck in that series.
Wow.
But it first appeared in the animated series. And so there's a bunch of instances. There's a really coming-of-age story that features Spock that actually was Emmy nominated. And it's basically Vulcans have to go through this ritual where they have to go into the mountains and not eat and drink for days and survive. And that theme of Vulcans having to do that is seen in a lot of the Star Trek live action franchises.
Okay.
But it started in the animated cartoon. Wow. And the episode from the animated series is called Yesteryear, and it's actually a continuation or a flashback from an original Star Trek episode. Oh my gosh, something Babel? I can't remember right now. They're going to take away my Star Trek card. But anyway, Dorothy Fontana wrote the story, and in the original Star Trek series, Spock is having a conversation with his mother about Spock being bullied for being half Vulcan and half human, and you actually get to see what happens in flashback in the animated series.
Okay.
And that episode also was kind of controversial because a pet had to be put down in the episode.
Yeah.
And NBC was like, oh no, we can't have a pet being euthanized on Saturday morning. But the agreement was when Gene Roddenberry agreed, whenever all the parties agreed to make the cartoon series, he says, I want complete creative control over this cartoon. I don't want to be fighting with S&P's broadcast standards and practices like I did with the original series. And so when NBC's NBC's standard and practices try to make an issue out of it, he had to remind them of the agreement.
Yeah.
And so the pet got put down, and I think that was one of the elements that helped that episode be nominated. It was like Star Trek sort of had its Old Yeller moment, the old movie Old Yeller, where a pet has to be put down. Yeah. And I feel like if that hadn't happened in the story, no Emmy nomination.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. So it's kind of interesting just looking at some of the episodes and seeing how they worked their way in. Mm-hmm. Some of the animated series also worked their way into some of the Star Trek books too, as well, the ideas that were conceived in the cartoon. And it was a lot of the original Star Trek writers that worked on the series. Like the people that worked on it, they said it was a continuation of the live action series. And they never referred to it as a cartoon. They referred to it as Star Trek in animation.
I think it's important for kids that are watching a cartoon to be able to see like hard themes like that too, like and see themselves in the characters, and like I went through this, or my family went through this too.
Right. Yeah, it's an important message, and sometimes hard things happen. Yeah. And you got to deal with it. It's a part of life.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love how sometimes that was explored. There was a series called The Secrets of Isis, which is a live action show about a female superhero that has the powers of Isis, and there's an episode where a kid, I think the dog gets hit by a car. Something happens to the dog and the dog dies. And the little kid walks up to Isis and says, well, you're a superhero, you have the power. And she's like, dude, I can't bring a... I mean, she didn't say it like that, but basically, dude, I can't bring a pet back to life. Not that. Exactly. And then she started to explain the circle of life. And I thought it was a great episode and a great lesson for kids to learn. So... to your point, it's pretty important. Yeah.
Well, all this knowledge that you have, that you kind of curated growing up from a child into adulthood, got you working in the industry for now over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So you were working at Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, and Boomerang first. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences?
Okay. It was... So I helped launch Boomerang, and then I worked for Cartoon Network.
Okay.
And then I moved over to Adult Swim.
Got it.
So at Boomerang and Cartoon Network, I basically came up with programming strategy and ideas. And so how to get the kids in the seat. So it might be something like Dexter's Lab's Craziest Experiments, and then we would kind of curate all of the crazy experiments that Dexter did, or the Powerpuff Girls best, 10-episode countdown.
Right.
Which was a lot of fun. Actually, that was the last project I did before I moved over to Adult Swim. Okay. And so it was like coming up with ideas to get the kids to keep watching your network for hours and hours on end, and counter programming also. So like a show like Captain Planet, which is old environmental series that was created by Ted Turner. It was educational and pro-social, but ratings wise, Captain Planet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon became a roadblock. So once Captain Planet came on, our viewers would go to Nickelodeon and Disney and never come back. And so that's something I learned. I'm like, okay, so, Captain Planet got, pushed a little further in the morning. Maybe do a little less ratings damage. But there was flow and anti-flow. Like, for example, a comedy going into an action show seemed to work better than an action show going into a comedy.
Interesting.
That is interesting, yeah. I can kind of feel that flow, though.
Yeah.
Because you want to have something light and then go into heavy, not heavy go to light.
That's true, yeah.
And Mike Lazo, who, created Cartoon Network, he was really big about what type of cartoons could air. So, like, even a cartoon, old classic cartoon like Tom and Jerry, he only wanted the original Tom and Jerry theatricals to air. The TV versions of Tom and Jerry, there were 2 TV versions that ran on Saturday morning. We had them in our library, but we didn't air them. Because he felt it would bring the ratings down.
Oh, I see.
When I moved over to Adult Swim, they started airing them, and surprise, kids didn't care. They still watched, and the ratings didn't go down. But that was his philosophy. We just want the purest, the original, the ones that won the Academy Awards to air. So I did that for a long time. Boomerang, I basically ran by myself.
How fun!
If one of my friends wanted to see a particular cartoon, I'm like, okay, it's going to air on this day.
I got you.
Because Boomerang didn't have any ratings in the beginning,
and
so I could do whatever I wanted. And since I was the expert, they let me. Much later, after I left the brand, they started putting commercials in, and they got a little bit more strict about what they aired. I mean, once ratings arrives and commercials arrive, then you actually have to do real programming strategy. But while we were building that network, it was whatever
willy-nilly.
Right, exactly.
That's the phase we're in with our podcast right now. We just get to do whatever we want.
Yeah, that's the fun part. That's the fun part. And then I moved over to Adult Swim around 2009, 2010. It was a different job, still scheduling, but scheduling the black and white text bumps. That air in between the shows and the what they call Insta-vines, and so they might show the Golden Gate Bridge, and there might be a little Adult Swim logo inside.
Yes.
So I had to regulate and schedule those, and also the promos. Coming up next, the new Robot Chicken, or coming up next, the Boondocks, or next week on the Boondocks. Making sure that those aired in the right places. And so if we did like a Rick and Morty premiere, we would sort of curate the whole half hour. We would work with sales. Okay, what commercials you want in there? And I would work with on air, like what promos you want in there, as well as the packaging team. So a lot of times they would make a special bump. You're watching a new season 4 of Rick and Morty coming up, so that would air right before the show started. And then there may be special commercials. It was sort of treated like the Super Bowl. A lot of people watch the Super Bowl for the commercials. But when we had a premiere on Adult Swim, and we knew a lot of eyeballs were going to be on it, we made sure that we put in the promos, the Adult Swim programming that we wanted people to see. And a lot of the sponsors made sure that they put their products up front, because it's going to be a lot of people watching. And even for the commercials, like one time we were watching a preview, and they had 2 car commercials airing back to back. And the salesperson's like, okay, I'll put one at the top of the break and one at the bottom of the break. Because 2 car commercials, or even 2 fast food commercials airing back to back.
You can't have it.
Right. The messaging gets lost.
Right.
Exactly. Too conflicting.
It is also wild to me that you mentioned at the very top of the interview, we were talking about your childhood, you mentioned Space Ghost, and then you ended up at Adult Swim. How wild is that?
I know. And Adult Swim, it was fun. It was like a really great culture. It was smaller. Like when I first got over there, Mike Lazo says to me, who's running Adult Swim, he says, we don't send a lot of emails. We just go and visit each other and have a conversation. And that just made working a lot easier. So it was of the 3 brands, I felt like Adult Swim, even though I was the classic animation guy, Adult Swim was really my tribe. Because everyone was super passionate about work, and everyone came to the table with great ideas, and there wasn't a lot of political stuff going on. It was all about the work. And because Adult Swim was the #1 adult network, and they probably still are, people didn't worry about ratings. And that makes things easier. Like when you're constantly worried about ratings, folks are tense and upset and finger pointing going on. Like, how can we make things better? But Adult Swim didn't have any of those issues, and so people came to the table with really good ideas, and people were really super passionate about their jobs, you know. So it just made things a lot easier. It was a great experience.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that human contact too. The fact that you could just go down the hall and talk to people and not have to do just the. I can't even think today. I'm sorry.
right. I understand. That's why I couldn't remember one of those Star Trek.
Yeah.
I get it. You know.
We're also at a higher elevation, so it's affecting our train of thought.
Oh yeah, we're not used to this being so high up in the world.
Yeah.
I want to stay on track so I don't lose my mind. So you take the next one.
Oh yeah, you got it. Yeah. So, well, we put rumor has it, but it's not a rumor anymore that you've been called the cartoon encyclopedia.
Yes.
Which is true. You're like you've been like a sommelier of cartoons this whole time. I'm like, oh, I know all the tones and notes and flavors now. And then we did talk about some of your favorite cartoons. Oh yeah, as far as cartoons have come recently, do you feel like there is something magical missing in today's cartoons that you found in the older cartoons like Scooby-Doo and the superhero cartoons?
No, I actually like a lot of what the new cartoon creators are doing. I feel like they have a little more freedom. So like the new book that I'm working on is called The Saturday Morning Backlash: The Fight for Creative Freedom. There was a lot of censorship in the 70s and 80s, or late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the fact that cartoon creators can do whatever they want now, which I feel like it should have been that way anyway. But you know, some of the storytelling is really good. There was a show I watched, I think it was on Netflix, called Hilda. And it was really good storytelling. And it went places that I didn't think that series was gonna go, and I thought it was, you know, really good. And sometimes it's just like, wow, this is fantastic. And I feel like if some of the cartoons that are being produced now would have been produced back in the day, it wouldn't have had a lot of those creative freedoms.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like a show like Batman the Animated Series and the X-Men series that came out in the 1990s, they really broke the boundaries. And I sort of mentioned that in Best Saturdays of Our Lives, that was the first time that superheroes were allowed to throw punches again when those shows premiered, because say from 1969 to 1991 there wasn't a lot going on. Although I admit that the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles sort of helped, you know, in between that time.
Bridge the gap.
Bridge the gap, exactly, because they you know, they had weapons, but there was a lot more action going on. Or even a show like G.I. Joe, The Real American Heroes. I'm like, how can you have a soldier that can't throw punches? And I was watching a lot of the old episodes, and you know, episode 6 is a punch, and episode 7 is a kick, and then the following episodes are punch and kick, and by the time they get to episode 50, it's an all-out brawl. And I think what a lot of the creators were doing back in those days, they says, well, these watchdog groups, they can't watch everything we're doing, so let's do it and then ask for forgiveness later.
And then our producer had a request. What were your thoughts on the Hair Bear bunch?
Oh. I really, really, really wanted to like the show. I like the character design. And I like the idea of these 3 bears who were, you know, sort of urban bears, you know, running their schemes and getting out and doing things. But I don't know. It just didn't appeal to me.
I can't connect.
And there was the guy that was the zookeeper, who I think it may have been played by Paul Lynde. Paul Lynde was a comedian. He was like the center square in Hollywood Squares for the longest time. He did a lot of cartoon voices, and I believe that he played one of the zookeepers. Mr. Peevely, yes.
Botch was his buddy.
I didn't really like those characters. You know, so I don't know. There wasn't enough to pull me in.
I felt like it was flat. You know, there was no depth to it. It was like, I don't know. I never get into it either, so I'm with you on that one.
You know, I couldn't. Like I said, I liked the character design. I thought it was cool. But
I haven't seen it. I'll have to watch it.
Yeah,
Go on YouTube and watch it.
It just didn't appeal to me
Yeah.
at all as a viewer.
It's like it should have been good, but it just wasn't.
Right.
Sometimes it be like
Yeah,
that.
it is sometimes like that. You know, sometimes they miss the mark, and I'm not exactly sure what creators worked on the show, but you know, like nobody bats 1,000.
No.
And that show was like, nope, change the channel now.
Producer must have been a big fan, though.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. All right. I can think to sing the same theme song right now. I loved it.
So, tell us about becoming a writer. Like, how did that transition?
Okay, so
you had your newsletters, so that was probably your first.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So that helped get me into the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
The newsletter. And then after I got in the newsletter, I said, you know what, I'm going to turn that newsletter into a book one of these days. But you know, I got comfortable and I got settled.
Yeah.
And then I got a call from Warner Brothers. They wanted me to do the DVD for Josie and the Pussycats was coming out. And they wanted me to do the commentary.
Cool.
It was going to be a bunch of us.
Yeah.
And my name was recommended. And then I get another call back saying, well, we can't. They basically couldn't afford to fly me out to LA.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe a phone call or something. Show a picture of my face and then, record me. That could have been a way to get around me.
Yeah.
But I got the impression that they only called as a courtesy. Like they basically had their people ready that were living out in LA. And I guess for me being in Georgia, they just didn't, whoever was in charge didn't know how to handle it. And so the other thing that they changed, we're not necessarily going to do a DVD about the cartoon series. We're going to do a DVD about Dan DeCarlo, who created Josie and the Pussycats in the comic book. I said, great, I've met Dan DeCarlo. I'm a fan. I can speak to his work and his art.
Yeah.
Still didn't want me.
Oh.
So when that happened, it was kind of disappointing. And that's when I decided I needed to write a book.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I had the book back then and my website, I would have been able to steer that conversation differently.
Yeah.
I said, here's why you should need me, because I've done this, I've done that, I've done this. So
it
was a good way to light a fire
under your booty.
Yeah.
You probably needed it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because after I wrote the book, some of my coworkers says, oh yeah, I'm glad you finally wrote it. You've been saying that you were going to write a book for years. And I said, I have? So I totally forgot that I had been telling people.
Yeah.
So, things work out.
Yep. Now you're a man of your word.
Right, exactly. I said I was going to do it and I did it.
So you wrote the Paperboy, the last one, right? Tell us about that process.
Okay. So I was at a book fair like this, and I met an author there, and I was telling her about the time that I lived in a haunted brownstone in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And it was kind of crazy. And she says, Mark, that sounds like a book idea. I said, okay. So I wrote the haunted house portions of the stuff that happened to me. And
now I got to read the book.
Right. And so once I wrote that part, I was struggling with a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
And when I was in middle school, I created a superhero called the Paperboy.
Yeah.
I had my own little comic book, and I decided to flesh out that character and put him in the story. And so that became my beginning and my end.
Yeah.
And I was always fascinated. So there was an era in the Wonder Woman books where, she lost the powers.
Yeah.
She didn't lose them. She renounced them. The Amazons had to go to another magical dimension, and they said, if you don't come, you can't be Wonder Woman anymore. Wow. And so they made her do this rite of renunciation, where she had to give up all of her gifts and everything. And the beginning of her story was really good. It was written by a guy named Denny O'Neil, and she moved into the hood in Gotham, and and she had to deal with being human and getting shot and killed, and she was still adventuring, but just the fact that she was human now, and just kind of realizing and dealing with emotions and stuff like that. So the Paperboy actually goes through a similar situation where he tangles with the wrong villain, loses his powers, has to do a little bit of therapy, and then he moves into the haunted brownstone and wishes that he had his powers again. But he sort of comes out on the other side as being a different type of hero.
Oh, wow.
So
That's pretty cool.
that's how that came about.
Okay.
You're kind of leading us into our next question, which is the theme of identity, loss of power, and struggle against the unseen. Why do you think it is important for young adults today?
Well, I think it's important because, we were talking about this theme about the kid losing his pet, which is a hard thing. And sometimes it's important because you just never know what's going to happen. Back in 97, I lost my wife. And it was a very hard struggle for me. I became a single dad with 2 boys.
Yeah.
And I just went through a lot of adjustments dealing with that. And I remember at one point, my mom came down to help me. And she goes, you've done really good. I'm so proud of you. And, when I look back, I don't know how I got through it.
Yeah.
But I did. But I think it made me a stronger person.
Yeah.
And I realized later, even though my wife Joy was gone, it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it made me stronger. And I think it made me a stronger dad to my boys.
Yeah.
So I think it's just one of those things that, sometimes when things happen and don't go the way that you want it to go, you have the strength within you to build yourself back up.
Yeah,
and I think it's important that people see that.
I think it's really brave that you share that
Yes.
part of your life. I know you don't like to share. You like to keep everything to work. And I can see your whole persona kind of changed, you know what I mean, when it comes to talking about your personal life. But it is very important that you're sharing that story because there's other people, who are going through loss and just don't know how to handle it, So you're kind of a pioneer for them, you can share how you handled it and then help others.
Yeah. A lot of prayer too, believe me.
Yeah.
to get through it.
Absolutely. I had somebody, I lost my father, and somebody explained it to my mom. She said, imagine like waking up an amputee and you're okay, but then it's like you have to learn to live without a part of yourself, and it just takes time. And like time doesn't necessarily heal it, but it makes it better, and you learn to kind of like find the strength that you didn't have before.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, that's what I told her too. I was like, oh, I like that.
We'll move on to the next question.
Oh, yes, one. Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. I got really into it. Sorry. Conversational hot tub. All right. And then you've done some voice acting yourself as well, too.
Yeah. So, like I said, Adult Swim was sort of a community, and there was this one project that the creator wanted everyone in the Adult Swim offices to contribute to this project. And so, someone, one of my coworkers submitted script pages, somebody submitted poetry, somebody else submitted music. And so the producer or the creator wanted me to do a voice.
Okay.
And he just came in my office one day and said, I've always liked your voice. Follow me to the recording booth. Just say the words exactly as I'm saying them.
Nice.
My goodness. Way to put you on the spot.
I know.
Right. And so the show was Game Oseto Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
And so like everyone in the Adult Swim building pretty much touched that series, and it was just a really wonderful experience. I also did a voice for it was an unsold pilot. It was called Macbeth with Dinosaurs.
What?
And
who dropped the ball on this?
Yeah, we didn't find this in any of our research, and I'm telling you, we did some deep digging.
I would watch that.
Right. And so I played the sun, the literal sun. And I think it was just one line that said, I have the power now, or something like that.
Oh,
and the funny thing is, so one of my other colleagues, he also, at one iteration of that show, also played the son. And we had breakfast one day. He says, I can't believe, Ned Hastings is his name. And Ned is how I connected with Gilbert Gottfried also. And so Ned and I were having breakfast one day. And he said, I can't believe we both played the son, and the pilot didn't go anywhere.
yeah.
So I did that. And then I have down here also that the series idea was spun off into doing the Milky Way pilot, but I'm not 100% sure if that went anywhere as well. But that's how Adult Swim was. I mean, because we had a recording studio and because some of the cartoons like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Squidbillies was being, created at Adult Swim, sometimes they would have people, or just, hey, I don't know if I would have seriously gotten the pilot role at all, but at the time, sometimes these guys need scratch audio, and they'll just say, hey, just read this so we know how it sounds and all this kind of stuff. So it was just really fun.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Did you enjoy that part?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy doing the voiceover?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It's a little harder than I thought because sometimes the directors want a certain thing, and you have to give it to them.
And sometimes there's like that cross communication. You're like, they're like, no, do it like this, and you're like, I am.
Exactly. So there was some of that, and then there was another one that I tried out for, and they really wanted me to sound, super effeminate. And looking back, I could have done it.
Yeah.
But I was a little too chicken to do it. I'm just like, oh no. I said I sound a little too girly here. But I definitely, looking back, I definitely could have nailed it because I have 2 cats. Well, 1 cat at home, and one of them, Sheba, who's no longer with us, but Sheba had. I just looked at Sheba and I just developed a whole personality for her.
Yes.
And I always have my family laughing at what I think she's thinking.
Catties, doggies.
Right, and how she sounds. And I feel like she was one of these, if she was a human, she would, like in the old films, there was always the pretty girl that wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she would say, charmed, I'm sure. But it didn't mean anything.
Yes.
And I feel like Sheba was one of those people, but I would always crack my family up with the voice that I would do. And I'm like, well, if I'm doing Sheba, I definitely could have done
I could have done it,
this other voice. But, it's 2020 is, just looking back. So, but if the opportunity comes again, I'll definitely go all out.
You're ready now.
Yeah.
Sheba was your practice.
Yeah, exactly.
My ex was like that. He was so good. He had personalities for all our and voices and stuff. And he would crack me up in that crowd. I would laugh hysterically.
And poor Sheba, she knew sometimes we were laughing at her, and she would just leave the room. She goes, okay, I'm the butt of the joke this time.
I'm exiting this place.
Well, I know you have to get back to your booth because you are hustling books. And I know you want to get, people want to see you down there. They want to see you. So we're going to skip ahead to the last question, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally good.
Okay, and then, hold on, let me unlock my, okay, here we go. So I want to talk to you about Dragon Con and get into that real quick. So I've been a few times. Sarah's never been. Will you talk to us? Oh yeah, sorry.
What?
We'll have to fill you in on that later. We'll have to fill you.
Can't say it now.
We can't say it now, but we read and proofread these questions over and over again, and then we put it in an email to send it to you to get approved. And I just had this gut feeling, and I went back and went again, and we found this one thing. Thank God we caught it.
Yeah.
We were dying laughing because I almost hit send, and I just realized in our question,
and so
did
it
voice
doesn't
text.
always read voice text, and it doesn't always pick up what she's saying, right? So the whole time there was like every time she said comma, we can say this.
Yeah.
We put it as karma.
Yeah.
So
Karma.
sometimes when she's reading, like I was like rereading her questions, and I'm like, karma. What does karma have to do with this question?
Literally, like, just had like almost like a nightmare dream. I like came across what we thought. I was like, I almost just asked this question.
I lost it. I started laughing. Okay, go back to your question. Then.
So, why is it important to Georgia and specifically the greater Atlanta area of Georgia, Dragon Con? People come from all over the world to attend. What do you feel sets it apart from other major cons in the U.S. and other countries?
Well, I know it's the largest convention in the Southeast, and that's pretty huge that's happening in Atlanta. And I actually, the guy that started Trek Atlanta, he at one point was over the Star Trek track at Dragon Con, and I think his claim to fame was that he got Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner and Patrick Stewart to show up at Dragon Con at the same time.
Wow.
And Dragon Con sort of became this mid-sized convention to this huge convention that we know of it today. But I think it's important for fandom and the Southeast, it does have a lot of conventions, but the fact that, Atlanta sort of is the jewel of the South, and to have this huge place where people can gather over fandom as well as cosplay, it's just an amazing thing. And to see the happiness in people's faces when you're at Dragon Con, sometimes it's happy because they're drunk, but just to see,
we'll take happy however we can get it.
Right, exactly. just to see all these people come together, and the fact that they're bringing all these huge Hollywood stars there, and the fact that they have all these programs for kids and families as well at Dragon Con. I just think I can't say that it's different than, say, maybe New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con. But what makes it different is the fact that it's in the South, and it's unique and it's different, and people sort of bring their own Southern flavor to it that you may not see at New York Dragon Con, New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con. It just makes it unique because it is in the South, and it's a great place for fandom and celebrities and stories. There was a celebrity that I saw in the elevator. I won't say who it was, but let's just say that he was, very, feeling no pain.
Yeah.
And he saw me and my podcast producer and host, Dan Klink, and we said hi to him, and he said hi to us, but he was giving us this look like, please don't. Please don't tell anybody that you saw me in this state. Like, he didn't say it, but his eyes said it.
Yes.
And I just thought that was funny. And so I've had some funny moments in the elevator too. So sometimes the elevators get really packed. Yeah. And there was a guy.
Why isn't this a show?
Right.
Oh, that'd be a good idea. That would be a good podcast, just being in the elevator and dragging on.
Yeah, so that's like a whole thing. And so some people go down to go up, and some people go up to go down just to get on the elevator because it's always packed. And there was a guy dressed in a Star Trek uniform as Commander Riker, and he wasn't sure whether or not to get in the elevator because it was packed. And then someone in the elevator shouted, "We got room for you, Commander Riker. Get in here." And he gets on the elevator, and everybody's cracking up because we all got the joke.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it was just fun. Yeah.
I love that.
That's really cool. Well, Mark, we cannot thank you enough for coming on here.
I kind of wanted to be over. It's like I could talk to you like all day, literally.
Really, seriously.
Yeah, this
is one of the shortest podcasts that we've had in a long time. So it's like, wait, we're done? I don't understand.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was great to be able to talk about my career and my books and all the little anecdotes and everything. And I love the questions and just being able to express myself. It's been wonderful.
Good. Does it make you want to get back into that podcast?
Oh,
world?
absolutely.
Yes.
Believe me, I already have my episodes laid out.
We're asking now. You got to have us up there.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
It will come.
For sure. Yeah. Dan Klink, who, like I said, he's my co-host and producer. I'm going to see him like in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to definitely tell him about this experience. I said, well, maybe we can bring the podcast back for a one-off or something like that.
That'd be awesome.
So we'll see. Cool. We'll see how it goes.
Well, we're low budget and just starting out. So we're not as big time as you.
We're working on it. We're Space Ghosted over here too.
Yeah, I understand.
If people can't make it to Literary Fest, Middle Georgia Literary Fest, where we are right now, Lit Fest, and they want to purchase your book, where can they find them?
They can go on my website, thebestsatudaysofourlives.com or tbsool.com. They can go there. They can purchase my book. They can purchase the Paperboy Dimensional Adventures. There is a website for the Paperboy Dimensional Adventures. It's just called dimensionaladventures.com. They can purchase the Paperboy there if they don't want to go to the other website. Twitter is McTBSOOL, McTBSOOL. Instagram is Best Saturdays of Our Lives, and I'm on Facebook. So
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so
Yeah, well,
much.
thank
It was
you.
such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to talk to you
Thanks
and
for
meet you.
having me.
You too.
This is great.
Yeah.
And with that, that's a wrap.